Larian held the promised AMA on Divinity to start off 2026, and while it didn't unravel every detail we may have wanted on the game, it answered some questions I had hoped it would find out, like whether or not the much talked about magic and physical armor system would be returning, and then surprised me with some things I completely didn't expect, like companion interactions. It of course talked about the big ass elephant in the room, Gen AI and all of that shit. And so we'll talk about all that thing. So ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, let's sit down and talk about it. And because I know not all of you want to sit and talk about everything, I put in chapters so you can jump around to whatever thing you want to talk about. So for example, if you don't care about the Gen AI combo, then you can jump right over to the Lizardman humping conversation. If you don't care about the Lizardman humping conversation, you can jump right over to the gameplay mechanics conversation. You can do you. You have free will and I am not an illithid, so just go do what you want to do. Links down below. The giant elephant in the room wasn't just all the gratuitous violence and Lizardman sex from the trailer, though that does get an important mention in the AMA, the gratuitous Lizardman sex that is. Stuff that I won't show for fear of YouTube's shitty AI blacklisting this video, which I probably have ensured by mentioning it like 7 times so far in this video. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with it. It's a personal problem. No, the giant elephant in the room was the Gen AI bullshit. First, here's the full statement from Sven Vinke from the AMA. Quote, "So first off, there is not going to be any Gen AI art in Divinity. I know there's been a lot of discussion about us using AI tools as part of the concept art exploration. We already said this doesn't mean the actual concept art is generated by AI, but we understand it created confusion. So to ensure that there is no room for doubt, we have decided to refrain from using Gen AI tools during concept art development. That way, there can be no discussion about the origin of the art. Having said that, we continuously try to improve the speed with which we can try things out. The more iterations we can do, the better in general the gameplay is. We think Gen AI can help with this, and so we're trying things out across departments. Our hope is that it can aid us to refine ideas faster, leading to a more focused development cycle, less waste, and ultimately a higher quality game. The important bit to note is that we will not generate creative assets that end up in-game without being 100% sure about the origins of the training data and the consent of those who created the data. If we use Gen AI model to create in-game assets, then it'll be trained on data we own." So clear as mud. So yeah, I guess it's a little bit of circular talking. I mean, I guess one of the big takeaways there is that they are kind of backing off what they said originally, that they were using it as exploratory tools for like generating ideas for concept art. They're no longer doing that. So it's pulling it back from one of the things they were doing, but still leaving open the door for using the tools in the future as things, or using tools to kind of create things, but only using it on their own assets that they own. I don't know, it gets kind of like muddy there, where even I'm a little confused at what's going on. It's just kind of weird, but there's more. And these are actually more clear cut, at least from where I'm sitting. These two are in reference not just to concept art, but to other extremely important parts of these games, writing and acting. They come from machine learning director Gabriel Bosk and writing director Adam Smith. First, from machine learning director Gabriel Bosk, who says, quote, "We explicitly committed in our actor agreements to not using the recordings to train or build AI voice modelers, because we are aware of how sensitive it can be to artificially generate an actor's voice, even if an actor were willing to agree to this if we'd compensate them. We don't currently feel comfortable with including an AI-generated voice in our games. Basically, we're not willing to do an art creators," which I think is kind of refreshing, because I think that this is one of the arguments that's been happening, where people will say, hey, well, okay, arc raiders, they're compensating them. But that's ignoring a very important part, because yes, arc raiders may be compensating the people, but when you're talking about that, who has the leverage? Who has the leverage in that conversation of compensation? The person who's doing the compensating, or the person who's agreeing to that compensation? It's a very important thing. So I'm glad that Larian is very explicitly saying they're not doing this. All of this does follow a longer quote about using machine learning tools to reduce mechanical legwork. However, it should be noted that prior to all this, one of the main takeaways, at least for me, from the Bloomberg article is that Well, it's all a bit of a wash, at least now. As with most of AI, a whole lot of empty promises with very little actual results and really high RAM costs. The quote from the Bloomberg article I'm referring to comes from Sven Vinke, but I think it got buried because of what it came after. It comes after the now infamous pushing hard on Gen AI line. Right after that, it says that the technology hasn't led to big gains in efficiency. Which, speaking of, here's this quote from writing director Adam Smith on Gen AI writing. Something of particular interest to me as an author. Quote, "We don't have any text generation touching our dialogues, journal entries, or other writing in Divinity." But this wasn't all that was said. There's some important additional details here, because originally when they talked about it, they were talking about placeholder text and using basically stub text. But this is not how you should be going about it, especially if you want to avoid any bullshit slipping through the cracks. But even beyond that, there's something that you would want to avoid as an author or a writer, just because you don't want to become bad at your job. And something that I implore other authors, new or like old long-term authors, not to use, because there's an actual phrase for what it does. It makes you fucking dumber. What it does is it's cognitive offloading, and cognitive offloading is basically you're giving yourself a way to not do the thing, not use the skill, and so you start getting worse at it. But before I get on my soapbox and before I talk about how that makes you worse as an author and worse at doing the very thing you're trying to be creative at, let's just listen to what they had to say. Quote, "We had a limited group experimenting with tools to generate text, but the result hit a 3 out of 10 at best, and those tools are for research purposes, not for use in Divinity. Even my worst first drafts, and there are a lot of them, are at least a 4 out of 10. Although Sven might disagree. And the amount of iteration required to get even individual lines to that quality we want is enormous. From the initial stub to the line we record and ship, there are a great many eyes and hands involved in getting dialogue right." Basically, not only is it bad, but it's inefficient. And so again, the same thing with it's not very efficient to do this, and it's not creating quality work. So there's not really a whole lot of point. You already have the people that are doing it for you, so why do it? And I understand this idea of exploring new tools, because you kind of have to, right? Like you kind of have to explore these tools, but it does seem like they explored and like this is shit. All of this seems to be the right move, and it follows Sandfall Interactive, who made Expedition 33, doing the same thing after they let a Gen AI placeholder slip into their final product, because even if you are just using this as a placeholder, it can and will slip through, and it will make your product worse. Gen AI isn't making things as well as the people who have been doing it for their damn job, who have been doing it for their entire lives. It's just doing shit faster and worse. And that's not even talking about the ethics involved in this. That's just talking about the literal product that they're putting out. And if you're sitting here thinking, why was this such a big deal for Larian to do this when everyone's doing it, when EA was doing this, when you had basically the Studio Ghibli art that Grok was putting out in freaking Battlefield? Well, because Larian had basically put themselves at the forefront through game developer conference speeches, through award speeches, as the developer that was kind of saying, hey, this shit's fucked with all of the layoffs. This is not how you make games. We don't have investors that we have to talk to. The way that we make games is basically making a game that we want to play, that we care about our developers, that we care about the people playing our games. And so that's why for people like myself and a lot of people playing these games, this was especially painful to see, because it was kind of like, oh, this isn't necessary for them to do. So why are they doing it? And so this is a whole AMA. Well, it's not probably what some people would have wanted. It's still better than what it could have been. So I think that's kind of, no one's gonna leave especially happy either way with this. I think that's kind of how it's gonna end up, is no one's gonna be like jumping for joy either way. But I think that's kind of where we're gonna end up with this. To put a little bow on this, the main way it sounds like they're going to be using machine learning or Gen AI, which I don't really honestly know how they kind of use these terms interchangeably in the AMA, is around cleaning up motion tracking data or potentially adding motion when it's not tracked properly, as well as being clear that anything that they do use will only be used on things trained on Larian's data. But now let's move on to the actual game stuff. First, the companion stuff, because that's the more interesting part to me, and second, the mechanics stuff. Larian was pretty tight-lipped about anything to do with player characters in the AMA or even what playable races might be in the game. Although there were some pretty interesting hints that lizard running might be on the menu, which will probably make quite a few people happy. I guess why it was so front and center in the Divinity trailer. I mean, I guess in between all like the skin burning and vomiting and just altogether grossness and pigs eating vomit, there was like, that trailer was just a lot.
I was destined to become the next emperor. But my ambitions suffered a bit of a setback when I fell from grace for cavorting with demons.
But beyond the potential lizard romancing, there was also mention that there might be something special planned for the orcs. Now it's important to note that with this, that doesn't necessarily mean that lizard men might be a playable race, just that there might be a romance for them. And it doesn't mean that orcs might be a playable race, just that there's something special planned. And all of this also could change as the game goes through it. As we all know, there was cut content from Baldur's Gate 3, we lost a werewolf companion, and everything does seem to go through iterations. Even Asterion was changed as the game went through. When Neil Newbin came in and kind of changed. So when they cast the characters, a lot of stuff changes. But there was a surprising amount of information on the companions that I did not expect. And I have to say, what I did hear has me extremely excited because it seems to be addressing two concerns a lot of people had with Baldur's Gate 3 that honestly, even games like Avowed and Veilguard may have done like a little bit better, or at least like comparably. Companion to companion interactions and less so are still important, turning off the sex sim vibes and making romance build up feel more authentic. Although that might have been a little unfair given that it might have been a little overtuned at launch, leading to the, world record runs. Let's dig into some of these quotes because they're kind of juicy. First, about the companions' interactions, this one comes from senior writer Kevin Van Ord, who says in response to acknowledgements that the companion-to-companion interaction outside of banter and a few cinematics is lacking, saying that that's something they'd like to improve on, saying, quote, companion relationships. Firstly, to have more interaction between companions, not just with more and better banter, but to have them develop deeper relationships with each other, just as they do with players. Secondly, to ramp up player friendship and romance more subtly, so relationship building feels natural. You're getting a 2-for-1 for the quote here, but this was really heartening to see because throughout Baldur's Gate 3, for example, the companions feel more often than not like satellites around your Tav, your main character. They each do have their very own compelling narratives, and the companions do react to those narratives, but it's more like one-off lines here and there. They don't seem to truly change in their understanding or interactions. Those changes are based around you. They're not really connecting to each other, and they certainly don't have agency. You are the ultimate arbiter of their fates, or in some cases, your dice rolls.
You're wasting your time and mine. The answer is no.
They stand in their own little tents, never interacting, siloed away until their preset path comes about. It would have been fascinating to see Will become friends with Asterion in one playthrough, or bitter enemies in another. Not through direct player action, but through their own agency. It'd add more dimension, like taking the preset scenes from Shadowheart and Lae'zel, but adding Larian's ability to branch out to them. Little decisions that can influence things down the line. Perhaps leaving two party members in a camp alone together for too many cycles leads to one outcome or another, for example. On the second subject in Kevin's quote, writing director Adam Smith had a longer, more expansive quote about romances in response to a question asking about romances in Divinity and if we should expect the same quality as Baldur's Gate 3. Adam said, quote, When we're designing and writing the romances, the goal is to make them memorable and to make them feel like a natural part of a character's personality and their relationship with the player. That means we discover the way to tell the romances as we develop to the companions and their stories, alongside character artists, cinematic artists, animators, performance directors, actors, and other developers. I hope we'll manage to push deeper into the depth and complexity of romance, love, and some other, not always positive, emotions. And I'm very excited to see what our cinematics team cooks up. This quote, combined with Kevin's about building relationships up more subtly, I think of creating a diverse, well-rounded experience with your companions. But I clung to one particularly interesting part of what Adam here said. One little section here. Something that could be something, or it could be absolutely nothing. Not always positive emotions. Certainly in Baldur's Gate 3, there are some especially not positive emotions, some somewhat toxic emotions that may be popular with a subset of people that played the game and went certain romance routes with a certain silver-haired vampire in a certain way. But you know, hey, to each their own. But there's other ways that things could go, especially when we back up to some of those other things that they're talking about with deeper interactions between the companions and deeper, more subtle interactions between the player character and your companions. There's a lot of room here for Larian to explore. It'll be interesting to see how deep and how wide they go. They dared to potentially kill one of your companions in Baldur's Gate 3. Well, two of them, technically. Could they add a betrayal, jealousy, companion-to-companion romances? When Larian risks killing your chosen romance companion in Act 3 of Baldur's Gate 3, players push back, so they change it to a lesser-used companion. What will they do with Divinity? Will they risk more? Will they be bolder? I don't know about you, but I kind of like the idea of being completely and utterly shocked by a companion betrayal late in the game. One that I'm not expecting, one that just kind of happens. I like that idea of that kind of like organic, like unexpected storytelling thing where the game doesn't feel as static with the companions. They don't feel as set as they might have otherwise because they often feel kind of safe. They feel very, very stuck. And so I like the idea of having a bit less safety around them, and so I'm holding on to that idea of some of those negative emotions. Now, number 3, this video is getting pretty damn long, but thankfully for my voice and for you being productive, not for actually having information, we didn't get a ton of actual gameplay information. So let's go through what we did get. For a quick primer on what we already knew before this, Divinity is going to be turn-based. It's going to be a mix of the styles of gameplay from Baldur's Gate 3 and Divinity Original Sin 2, really from all the games they've worked on, but primarily the games they've made from the team they had more recently. They've grown from about 400 strong to about 500 strong to make Divinity. Now from the AMA, we got some hints on a few things. The game will ship with multiplayer, which is gonna be awesome because multiplayer is basically a secondary version of the game. And I highly recommend if you haven't played Larian games as multiplayer, go do it because it kicks ass. But that had already been kind of confirmed. One of the bigger confirmations is that they won't be carrying over Divinity Original Sin 2's magic and physical armor system. Some people loved this system. Some people hated it. Hi, I'm some people. Sorry. If you haven't played the game, it basically meant that there were 2 types of armor before you got to the soft innards of your enemies. Those armors would block statuses like bleeds, stuns, burning, etc., unless you had ways to bypass them. I personally didn't like it because I felt compelled to kind of unify my party damage types a bit, or at the very least focus fire, but others did enjoy it. For those others, it's gone, sorry. We don't know though what exactly is replacing it. The exact quote was that they're still cooking on a system to counter the CC, but it won't be tied to damage. But funnily enough, that's actually not the part of the AMA that I think got the most like tread on the internet. I think the gameplay portion that got the most is actually a quote that got a lot of people talking about what it might mean, because it's kind of cryptic. It brought about a lot of theories. And the most popular one is that it might finally be alluding to adding swimming to the game. The quote that has been circling comes from the head of design, Nick Peckin, saying, "There was something that bothered me when I explored the starting areas of DOS 1, DOS 2, and BG3. It stares you right in the face if you think about it. In Divinity, I can finally do the thing I wanted to do in every previous game." And yeah, sure enough, most people think that it's swimming, and it makes sense. You start on a beach and there's water everywhere, especially with those prior confirmations that Divinity will be in a new engine, not the same engine that Baldur's Gate 3 or DOS 2 was in. A new, more powerful engine. Adding swimming would make for new dynamics and possibilities, but I have a separate theory. What if it's fishing? Okay, it's probably not fishing, but wouldn't that be a really freaking cool callback? Although honestly, either way, if the ducks that have been inspiring Sven Vinka are like added into the game, we are well and truly fucked. My name is Edward Flynn. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day. And I will be back soon with another video on Rise of the Dawnwalker that I bumped for this one because I thought I should get this one out soon. Thank you so much. Have a great day.